Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's tour catch-up, sponsored by downloadtennis.com.
King Carlos wins Indian Wells and reclaims the #1 spot.
Rybakina gets her AO revenge.
And Raducanu draws Andreescu in a marquee Miami round 1.
Chris, today is the 21st of March and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ, specially backed by our crowdfunders, Emily, Staracina and Ellie. The past week on tour, we've seen Carlos Alcaraz back to winning ways at Masters level, getting his third Masters 1000 title. Elena Rybakina getting her first Masters 1000 title and kind of demolishing Iga Swiatek en route. And Daniil Medvedev making the final despite all of his moaning about the court surface and his somewhat toxic relationship with the courts out in Indian Wells. So loads to catch up on from Indian Wells and also loads to look forward to in Miami as we enter the second part of the Sunshine Double. How are you doing, Chris? Are you well? I'm glad you've been able to join me because Joel is off for another week in a row, isn't he? So it's just me and you again.
He is indeed. He's left us in control for a second week in a row. It must be the first time in history that's happened, but we must reassure listeners this is not due to his head injury. This is due to his birthday celebrations where he's actually away for a long weekend. Obviously it's now Tuesday, so a very long weekend, and he's now in Ramsgate, I believe. I think he's been enjoying some woo-woos by the coast.
Woo-woos by the coast, that is how Joel does his birthday. Ramsgate, very glamorous seaside destination.
Unusual choice, I would say. Slightly unusual, but I think
he has his reasons, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he does as well.
Yeah, so Joel's less of a Hugo person, isn't he? He's more of a woo-woo. I don't know if he's going to be able to find Hugos in Ramsgate, but
we'll have to test him if he listened.
Yeah, he sent us a photo of some woo-woos, so we know he's getting some sort of alcoholic beverage in for his birthday.
Some hydration.
Yeah, and I'm going to take that to mean his head's better if he's on the woo-woos.
Yes. Happy birthday, Joel, we should say. We should
actually wish him happy birthday rather than lament the fact that he's not here. He's abandoning the podcast 2 weeks on the trot. But no, he will be back for our next episode. And Chris, last week on the tour, loads has happened, loads of tennis to talk about. But have you got a particular highlight from the last week that you'd like to share with myself, Joel, and our listeners?
I have indeed. Friend of the podcast, someone I spoke to earlier this year at the Davis Cup tie, Rohan Bopanna, became the oldest man ever to win an ATP Masters 1000 title, which I thought was rather brilliant. And he's been on a run of great form. The record was previously held by someone he's actually won doubles titles with in the past, in Daniel Nestor, who was actually 42, and this was in 2015 this record has stood, just a few days younger than the 43-year-old Bopanna. So that was something that was very impressive. He was playing with Matthew Ebden in that one, and they beat the top-ranked duo. So unfortunately for British tennis fans, that was Neil Skupski and Wesley Koolhof. And that was a champions tiebreak, 10-8 in the third. So very close to that history not being made. But one thing I have to say, not just the result, but something I thought was, I didn't know this, and I have to see if you do, but apparently the secret to success a little bit later on in your career is the Indian coffee that he's been having whilst he's been travelling. Apparently it's the biggest thing to help you recover, and he knows a lot about it because his family own a coffee plantation. So I had no idea that was the case, and maybe we should all be having a bit more Indian tea in our diet.
Well, yeah, Indian tea and coffee. I had no idea he owned a coffee plantation. That must mean he just gets a lifetime supply of coffee. So no wonder he's flying, isn't he?
He's very caffeinated. It must be.
Very caffeinated.
The secret is have so much caffeine, especially just before that final set tiebreak.
Yeah, well, they do say it's a good, obviously, thing to have prior to playing sport. So I guess there's yeah, there's some truth in this. Or, maybe he's just promoting his own coffee.
It's a good opportunity to get it in. I can see that. But either way, when you hit a record like that, he's up to 11th in the ATP doubles ranking. So something to celebrate. And why not get a few additional sales for your coffee?
Absolutely. Maybe he could come on the pod and promote it. We could get some free samples.
Yeah, I mean, we could easily do that. And then we could also maybe do a separate session. We could do a tasting. Could be something very nice to do.
Ooh, that does sound nice. I have to tear Joel away from his woo-woos and tear me away from my Hugos to go off to something caffeinated with the coffee. My highlight of the week is a story that I just loved when I heard it. I like tennis and I like travelling. And obviously with tennis, there's quite a lot of travel involved, but one player in particular had a bit of a mad dash because Nuno Borges, who won the Phoenix Challenger on Sunday out in Arizona. He beat Alexander Shevchenko on Sunday in the final. He was due to play in the Miami Open qualifying on Monday. And he said that as soon as he knew he'd kind of got into the final of the Phoenix Challenger, he knew getting from A to B, Sunday to Monday, Phoenix to Miami was going to be a bit tricky. There were no more direct flights, not many transport options. So he finished on court at about 7 p.m. in Miami, and he had to play, 7 p.m. in Phoenix. And he had to be in Miami to play his next round match, 4:30 p.m. the next afternoon. So he went to the airport straight away, got a flight, landed early in the morning in Atlanta, local time, and then had, I think, get another connecting flight out to Miami. Bit of a delay due to a technical issue. I'm sure there was a lot of stress involved, but eventually he landed in Miami around 11 a.m, managed to get to the hotel, actually get a quick nap in, then got a shuttle bus to the site from the hotel, came onto court, played Steve Johnson. And the remarkable thing is he actually won in straight sets after all of that travel. I'm sure he wouldn't have got much sleep at all, what with getting two flights and waiting around, hotels and airports. But with just a nap, basically. And maybe some of Rohan Bopanna's coffee, if he was able to find it.
I mean, he could do with some, that's for sure.
He managed to win his qualifying match. And he is actually due to go on court for his final qualifying match against Borna Gojo today. I think they're going to be starting quite soon. So if he wins that, he'll be in the main draw of Miami. And I think that he will deserve much applause for his, efforts in actually getting to Miami, but he's obviously in good form because having won that challenger, he is about 68 in the world, so he's not complete stranger, but being able to get into the main draw of Miami will be a big feat for him.
Yeah,
we wish him
and
luck.
You really hope he does, because if you I think he's the number one seed in qualifying, so I think it's one of those ones where you kind of hope that if you put together a great week, they might give you a cheeky wild card if you don't manage to make it. But fingers crossed, nothing against Gojo in that one, but 100% think that probably this is the story we want to hear, that he hasn't been handicapped by his success on the Challenger Tour.
Yeah, because this is probably a reality for a lot of players. They're trying to plan their schedule so that you don't know from one week to the next how well you're going to do in one particular tournament, and then you have to, potentially reschedule. It's
not all
everything.
glamorous, is it, Kim?
No, it is not. And Nuno, I'm sure, can tell us more about that. But I remember some players, I think, when we have the grass court tennis, they, I want to say it was Ivan Dodig or someone had to play like 2 matches at 2 different tournaments on the same day, but it was sort of all in the UK, so they could kind of get from A to B within the space of a day. But there was some ridiculous instance. I'm sure one of our listeners remembers who it was and when, but I'm sure it was on the grass. But yeah, that's reality of life on the tour. Bit different for the very top players, and we'll get on to the very top players because we're going to discuss who won the Indian Wells events last week. Let's talk about the WTA result first of all, because we had a final between Elena Rybakina and Aryna Sabalenka, which ended up with Elena Rybakina winning 7-6, 6-4 to get her very first WTA 1000 title. She's already a Grand Slam champion, of course. This is now her 4th career WTA singles title, and her first title since she won her Grand Slam last year. Chris, what were your initial thoughts off the back of this final? You know, it was straight sets to Rybakina, but a very, very close first set. And at the tiebreak in that first set, it was 13-11. So, you know, went on a long while in that first set.
It really did. I was actually watching that one live in the tiebreak. I actually managed to tune in at 6-all. So I saw all... what would that be, 24 points, another 24-point tiebreak, a bit like what was it, Pegula Kvitova from last week. But it wasn't pretty, I'd say. It was a bit blustery out there, and unfortunately the Sabalenka service ghosts were back out, the ghouls of the serve were back out, because unfortunately she did hit 10 double faults, and some of those came at crucial moments in that first set. There was actually 10 in the first set and 0 in the second set, so it really did have a big impact when you look at how close that score was, and that probably she should have edged that. There were 7 set points saved before someone took a set point, so you do think that whoever won that one probably would be the favourite to come through. And I mean, she did play pretty well in the second set, Rybakina, but it was about getting the job done on the day. And I think that's something that I was very impressed with, because you might have a bit of scar tissue from that Australian Open final. Obviously, it was a rematch of the final, and it was a different result then. And Rybakina did obviously kind of start the better in the Australian Open final as well. So she'd never got a win against her. It's her first in 5 attempts. So I do think that it was pretty impressive to come through in that way against someone who you probably don't have a great matchup against.
Yeah, and Sabalenka's ranked, you know, number 2 in the world. So with this win, Rybakina has actually won her last 4 matches against the top 2 players in the world. So last year at Wimbledon, she beat Ons Jabeur, who was number 2 in the world then, and she beat Iga Swiatek this week to get through to the final to then win, who's, you know, of course, the world number 1, and she beat her in the Australian Open as well. So she is getting the job done against, you know, the very, very higher echelons of the tour at the moment. Obviously missed out in the Australian Open final, as she said to Sabalenka, but managed to get a bit of revenge by claiming Indian Wells. I think also the second serve, you know, she was winning a lot more points behind her second serve than Sabalenka was. So I think the serving, I think was probably the edge really in this match. But at least Sabalenka managed to iron out those double faults in the second set, which is a positive. You know, she said afterwards that there will be some days when old habits come back, when referring to the old habits from last year of her troubles on serve. But, you know, she was able to kind of rectify it a bit within the match itself, which is a positive for her. So yeah, Rybakina up to I think number 7 in the world now. So she's going up and up and up.
That's without Wimbledon points. So I believe if they did count, she'd be number 3, just behind Sabalenka and Swiatek.
And playing like it. They are kind of playing as the top 3 players, really, aren't they, based on this year's form and results. I mean, yeah, other notable moments, I suppose, from the week, you know, was that Rybakina victory over Iga Swiatek, 6-2, 6-2. This is her second straight sets win over Iga Swiatek. Is it just a really bad matchup for Swiatek against Rybakina, or does Rybakina just think, right, I'm up against world number 1, I'm going to absolutely, you know, I'm just going to bring my absolute A game and get this done? Like, what do you think is the difference when they meet at the moment on the court?
Well, actually, I listened to her kind of speaking about why she thinks it's a good matchup, and I think she genuinely thinks when she plays against someone like that, there is no pressure. And I think especially once you've got a kind of a win against someone like that. I mean, she got a win in the off season against her in straight sets. I think she lost sort of 4 games there as well. She got another relatively straightforward win in Australia. And so I think it's just a case where when the pressure really is off, she plays some of her best tennis. I think she goes out there without expectations. She knows that she probably, based on the form book, isn't necessarily always expected to win that match. I mean, at the moment, irrespective of what your head-to-head might be against Iga, we've seen tennis of the highest level from Iga, and she is a world number 1, and she is the current holder of 2 Grand Slam titles. So I think it is a case that she just swings. She really does, and knows that she has to play her best tennis. And it's something Serena has always said, that when you are number one, or when you are someone who is kind of held in that esteem, you do have a target on your back. Everyone plays their best tennis against you, or tries to, every time that you play. And it's kind of, you play against the most inspired people at their most inspired. And so I feel like for Rybakina, it is that exact situation, that the higher ranked you are, the more dangerous she is to play against.
She might very well be on the other end of that, if her projection up the rankings continues.
She's got to stay at number 3, right? Never above that.
Yeah, exactly. Then she can continue to beat the top 2 players.
Yes.
Just lose against everyone else. No.
Yeah.
I mean, she did have a tough quarterfinal against Karolina Muchova, and that could have potentially gone very differently, because there was a set point in the first set between Muchova and Rybakina. Muchova hit an overhead. She had set point and just completely. I mean, what were you thinking when you saw this shot, Chris? Because a bit of a disaster.
It really was. It was one of those shots where you just hope that they don't have Twitter accounts, because you really don't want to see that one back again, because it was a bit sort of meme central in terms of things that sort of preceded unfortunate events in terms of that match, and that being a key turning point. I guess it just shows, that no matter what the situation, what the score is, just how important it is to make sure that you get those the points you should be winning, and you don't kind of make too many unforced errors. Because had she won that, I mean, she did win the next set 6-2, Muchova, and then obviously she went down in 3 sets 6-4. So I mean, it's a hard one to get over, that one. But again, Rybakina is obviously playing some really great tennis, and Muchova has actually gone through to the first round, qualified for Miami, with a loss of, I think, just 6 games. So she has not dwelled on that, and she has got herself another couple of wins. And I think we both have her as potentially doing quite well in Miami, Kim. So although it was pretty difficult viewing for that particular shot, I'm looking forward to some more good tennis from her this week.
Yeah, she seems to still be in good form, and I'm sure that one shot won't put her off too much.
She'll take a dry volley next time, maybe. What do you think?
Yeah. Sabalenka, despite losing in the final, she had some good wins throughout the week against Sakkari in the semis, and Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals. She sort of destroyed Coco Gauff, really, 4-love. With Coco Gauff, had previously had a very good record against Sabalenka. I think she'd beaten her 3 out of their last 4 meetings, but Sabalenka sort of turning that around, just overpowering her, out-hitting Coco Gauff, really. What do you think went wrong for Coco Gauff in that match? I don't know if you saw much of their quarterfinal, but do you think it's just the forehand proving too much of an issue, especially against someone of Sabalenka's caliber in her current form?
Yeah, I think this was a case where there were no service issues. I think I saw that this was the first time all season that Sabalenka has gone through a match without facing a single break point. So obviously the serve was working very nicely. And then, if she's seeing the ball like a football and she's really able to get her eye in, she's very difficult, especially when she gets that sort of first set. She's a great front runner at times. So I think the matchup itself, I've always been surprised that Sabalenka's had such a poor record against Gauff. I think potentially it could be because Sabalenka hasn't always given herself that much margin previously. I think something that's really clicked for her this year and the back end of last year is she isn't kind of having to paint the lines. She's not always having to hit the cover of the ball. I think she's playing with a bit more topspin, and I think she's playing with a bit more margin. So, if she's hitting big targets and she's playing well and she's putting pressure on that forehand, it can break down. I don't think Gauff played too badly. I think it was a case that Sabalenka sort of played to her strength and really kind of played to her weakness from Gauff, and it really kind of broke down in that sense, and Sabalenka was playing well. So unfortunate, but I think we were all a bit surprised by the nature of that, and we weren't necessarily expecting a bagel in that one because Coco's such a good defender.
Yeah, I thought it would be a bit closer. It was quite up for that match. They're both in the top 10, and I guess, you do often see very one-sided scorelines, but it seemed a bit of a shame, especially Coco Gauff being on kind of home turf as well. And another player as well, perhaps a bit disappointing, getting to the semi-finals, but just sort of seeming to lose with a bit of a lackluster scoreline. Maria Sakkari. Doesn't surprise me that she got to a semi-final and lost. Looking at kind of stats, Maria Sakkari, out of all WTA semi-finals and finals put together, she's won 8 and lost 27 of them. Some great stats around that. If you're looking at all of the top 10 players, she by far has the worst record in finals and semi-finals. 22.8%, 22.9%, I should say, of those semis and finals won. I think the next highest player is on 47%, and Swiatek is up the top with 75%. So quite vast differences. And I know we've said this many times before that she seems to get to semi-finals and kind of combust a little bit, or just she can't perform. Doesn't seem to have that extra level to get to. Do you think that's... I feel like we've asked this question, before as well, but do you think that should we stop talking about her as a major contender, given the fact that she's not able to get over that next hurdle, it seems? Or am I being super harsh?
Well, when you see it in black and white, I think it's very clear. I mean, this is a good, 25% lower pretty much than anybody else when it comes to winning the bigger matches in tournaments. And that is kind of the fact of the matter is that she can't win clutch matches. And she does have a real tendency of kind of going off the board when it comes to it. It is mental. We know she has the game. If you're making that many semi-finals, she's obviously been in positions where she could kind of push forward a bit more. She's had many more semi-finals than the likes of like Coco Gauff, for example, even than Pegula. She really has kind of pushed forward in many of these tournaments. And that is something that is a problem. I think she should switch up her coaching situation. I think we probably do have to kind of stop predicting her to go that much beyond a semi-final. And I think it is a shame, but I do think you have to look at the mental side of the sport and realize that, it's not the physical side that's a problem. It's very much between the ears. But I've seen a lot of people who are like defending how well she does and how good it is. But I think a lot of players would rather be picking up titles and then losing occasionally a little bit earlier and be a little bit less consistent if it meant that they were getting sort of the higher highs rather than kind of being sort of in the middle of the top 10 but never really posing that big threat.
Yeah, it sort of gives me Tim Henman vibes. As when I was growing up,
bit, yeah.
He was always sort of getting semis of Wimbledon but not ever, doing much more than that. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but yeah, I think, like you said, she's an absolute, she's so physically strong. It's all kind of, like you said, mental really, isn't it? And other factors, it's not physicality, I would imagine. But it remains a bit of a conundrum, but we hope she will eventually break it. Let's look at what happened on the ATP side of things out in Indian Wells now, because we had Carlos Alcaraz winning the tournament, beating Daniil Medvedev in the final in straight sets, 6-3, 6-2. Alcaraz, this is his third ATP Masters 1000 title, and with winning this, he now returns to the world #1 ranking. He's just pinched the top spot from Novak Djokovic by a couple of 100 points. There's not much in it, but he is, as of yesterday, back at #1 in the rankings. He won this title without dropping a set. Very dominant performance, and he's now the youngest man to have won both elements of the Sunshine Double, so both Indian Wells and Miami. He won Miami last year and has completed it with Indian Wells the year after. And he's also, along with Rafa, can I just say, well, they're the only players to have won at least 3 Masters 1000 titles as a teenager. So, yeah, Alcaraz continuing to make history and break records. What did you make of Alcaraz's performance in this final, and what made the difference, over Daniil Medvedev? It was a fairly, comfortable scoreline, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Well, Kim, I'm glad you've asked, because I'm trying to redeem myself from last week, where I volunteered that I made a tally chart of the points in a tie-break whilst watching the Medvedev Zverev tie-break. So that I want to move on from by offering something much better than a tally chart. I was looking at what the difference might have been, and I think that the service aspect of things is actually where the big difference lies. So I remember when it came to the US Open final, and the whole of the US Open, I mean, it was 5-set after 5-set after 5-set marathon, and he really was struggling to finish some of these points a bit quicker. And I think the key area where there's been a lot of improvement is actually in the serve. So in the final, he did not face a break point. And I was actually comparing his performance across the entire tournament with his performance in the US Open final from last year. And in the whole of this tournament, he faced 11 break points and was broken just twice. And that's across 6 matches and 11 and a bit sets, because obviously Jack Draper unfortunately had to retire. Whereas in last year's US Open final, he faced 10 break points and was broken 3 times. And it was definitely a case where he was being broken much more frequently and wasn't consolidating behind his serve. So if you look at the scores across the week, I mean, he rarely played or was pushed into like a tie-break situation, for example, coming through against Felix in straight sets. He did play a tie-break against Sinner, but there's much less, I guess not much less competitive, but he was able to assert his dominance much more. And another key thing is that in the US Open final, he had a 55% record on his second serve, but it was 70% in the final here. So I don't know how he's managed to do this despite being injured, but he's superhuman. He's very much improved his serve, I believe, or his mentality when it comes to backing up that serve, because it's clear that he is winning many more service points as well as causing a big problem on return.
Yeah, and also I think what's interesting is that both of these two, they didn't actually play each other last year. So they've only played once before, which was back in Wimbledon in 2021, which is, in terms of Alcaraz's progression up the rankings, that's actually like, quite a long time in sort of, in terms of his improvement and his performance and where he is now compared to where he was then. So it's a kind of different Alcaraz, really, isn't it? And I was surprised to see that they hadn't played, since then. That
is a strange one, because they've both been obviously very highly ranked and making, the latter stages of tournaments. But I guess Medvedev did have that wobble in the middle of last year where he didn't necessarily progress that far. And obviously he didn't have much of a grass court season. But I've just actually got some stats up from that match you mentioned in Wimbledon. And it was 32% of points won in his second serve and just 62 on his first serve. So it's clear that the serve is definitely maturing as he's kind of getting more physically strong, potentially. And actually, Medvedev was 7 of 15 break points in that match, and that was pretty straightforward, a 6-4, 6-1, 6-2. So it looks like, and scarily, he is getting better, which, I mean, that's a scary prospect, isn't it, Kim?
He's already the world number 1, and he's, still got a lot of improvement, but he's getting better and better. I mean, do you think Alcaraz is just going to stop like traditional next-gen players from picking up, not just Grand Slams, but also these sorts of Masters titles? We saw the likes of Yannick Sinner. He got to the semi-finals, but, lost in straight sets to Alcaraz. And, Sinner, similar age group, next-gen sort of champion. But Alcaraz could just very well stop them all. I mean, he also beat Felix Auger-Aliassime en route to the title. If Alcaraz is there playing this well, are the others really going to get a look in? I mean, they might only pick up one Masters title at best if Alcaraz is going to be, super dominant. I'm this is potentially, are we going to go from one dominating force or 3 dominating forces to a new era of a different, person dominating? Who knows? Or am I just getting carried away with myself, Chris?
Well, I don't think you're getting carried away, because I do think that when you have a performance like this, obviously it can change on a week-by-week basis, and the conditions being a bit slower, a bit more similar to maybe a clay court, might have favoured him a little bit in terms of that. And we do know that obviously Medvedev does have this toxic relationship with the court surface there, despite making the final. But when you look at the fact that even since he's made his comeback, you know, he obviously picked up a title in his return tournament, made a final, was a bit injured in that final, and then now hasn't even played a match on hardcourt before coming up and picking up another Masters title. So it is scary in terms of what he's able to do physically and how he's been able to get so quickly back to the top of the game and kind of reassert his position and kind of answer all questions about, you know, coming off that US Open win, if he can back it up, because clearly he can, and he has been producing the tennis that I would argue his level in Indian Wells was better than it was at the US Open.
Yeah.
I think it really was. So when you say this, I think it's a case where Sinner is great to watch, but he doesn't get it done against those top players, as you said. And I think we saw a stat this week that it was only 3 wins in 20 matches against top 5 players. And that's kind of the polar opposite for an Alcaraz. And you do think that someone like Alcaraz will sort of nip people like, I guess some of the mid-gen from getting some of those titles. And I mean, if Djokovic is playing, if Alcaraz is playing, we'll have Nadal back soon, hopefully. I think the combination of, you know, the next gen, or whatever we're calling, he's very much the present gen though, playing against the older guard. I mean, it's going to be slim pickings.
You just said next gen, and then you said mid gen, and then next gen, and now I don't know what gen is what.
Yes, I don't know what gen it is. I think we are Gen Y.
Yeah, I get confused between generation.
Are we millennials,
X,
Kim?
Y, and
we don't
Z.
know.
I don't know. I don't know what I am, and I want to reveal my age to everyone. I'm not sure. But yes, it was a fantastic week on the tour for Carlos Alcaraz. We'll see if he, you know, is going to make it 2 titles, you know, out of 2 at the Sun. He could do the complete Sunshine Double in 1 year, couldn't he, if he wins Miami? But we will, it remains to be seen whether he will do that. But he'll take good form with him into Miami. Let's take a very quick break now, but we will be back in the second half, where we'll be looking at all of the action to come in Miami, as well as some other talking points from the tour. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to Tennis Weekly, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And now we're going to move on to our little quiz segment to kick off the second half. Chris, you very kindly teased me with a mysterious player last week, and I've got one in return for you to have a crack at.
I'm very
along with our
excited.
listeners. So you're in the hot seat.
I'm a bit worried though, Kim, because I remember from the quiz last year that you do have the toughest questions. So I'm a little bit apprehensive, but the idea of taking on the first mysterious player, I think is it's quite an exciting prospect.
Yeah, well, I think, I haven't done a mysterious player for either you or Joel for a long time, so I'm not sure how hard I'm going to make it, but I'm sure you'll do a great job. And there is a Miami Open link as well, so I've tried to make it a little bit topical. So are you ready to get cracking?
I am ready. How many how many prompts do I have though? How many am I playing with?
Well, I can kind of keep going indefinitely, but I'm confident that you will get it after a certain number. I don't think on the podcast I don't think we've ever gone beyond about 7 prompts. So.
Oh goodness, don't say so. I don't want to be here at 15.
Okay, right. Clue number 1. I was born on the 17th of May, 1991.
Ooh. We do not know the gender of the player that I'm guessing. This is tricky. I'm going to say, to keep it moving, I'll go for... What about Heather Watson, let's say? She likes playing in Miami.
Heather Watson. Oh, she does, doesn't she? I feel like I always start with the age of the player, and no one ever gets it from like a birthday. So, that was probably a long shot. No, it's not Heather Watson. So, but not far off.
She's a May birthday, I think. Maybe she's May 21st. She's definitely in May.
Ooh, that's...
I'm scaring you here.
Yeah, Andy Murray's got a May birthday. Maybe it's a British thing. Okay, clue number 2. I reached a career high singles ranking of 4 in the world.
Oh, number 4 in the world. Now that is a tricky one, because I guess you probably... never won that. Oh, I guess maybe they won Miami. I am going to say, the only person I know who peaked number 4 is Caroline Garcia to head, and I know that's wrong.
No, it's not Caroline Garcia, but I mean, she did. Yeah, her career high is number 4, but
she's
not
a little bit
correct
younger
just yet. She's a bit younger as well, I think. Yeah. Clue number 3: I hold treble citizenship and used to represent a different country to the one I represent now, or have represented more recently.
Oh, that is quite an interesting one. This makes me think. The dates are quite surprising, though, because you think maybe, when there was East and West Germany, maybe there's a few more people who jumped around a little bit, because this is sort of in 1991. I am going to say the only player that I can think of that's played for a couple of countries and has been ranked that highly, I'm going to say Jo Konta.
Oh, Chris. Your position as doing well on these quizzes, it remains almost perfect because, yes, it is Jo Konta. You got it after 3 clues.
Goodness.
Well done.
I was trying to think, what were the nationalities? Was it Hungary, Australia and the UK?
Correct, yeah. She has Hungarian, Australian and British citizenship, reached number 4 in the world. I was going to get on to the Miami link, which was that she won the Miami Open in 2017.
Yeah, 2017. That was a great result against Caroline Wozniacki in that final, wasn't it?
I was just about to ask you who she beat in the final, and you've just answered it. So I knew you'd know that. I was thinking, is Jo Konta too easy for you? I know your knowledge of WTA and WTA British players is exceptional. So, but I thought
that was great fun.
6 years since she won the title. So well done, listeners. I hope you also managed to maybe get Jo Konta. Did you get it maybe before Chris?
Did you get it before me? Yes.
Did you get it from her birthday?
A few people, Kim, might have got it on the last week's Anyone Who Listened, where we talked about Tommy Haas and that Federer match from Roland Garros. I think that's stuck in a few people's memories. Maybe as a Nadal fan, maybe you didn't pay attention that year as much because he'd been knocked out, but that was a tricky one as well. So let us know, listeners, if you got it before us.
But when I was looking at Jo Konta, on her Wikipedia page, it says that she's trying to build a house in the Ashdown Forest, which have apparently her plans to do that have proved controversial. So
Goodness.
Not too sure what's going on yet, but I think...
Was that the next clue, Kim? She plans to build a house.
Yeah, so that's something environmental campaigners were up in arms. She was trying to construct a property somewhere in the forest, but I'm not sure how she's getting on with that. But we're not really here to talk about her plans to build a house in the forest, are we? But the answer is very much Jo Konta. So well done, Chris, and well done to our listeners who got it correct as well. We do have a Tennis Weekly mailbag as well. We got an email from Stephen Rankin. Thanks so much for getting in touch. Stephen asks us, if Sabalenka and Rybakina were to hypothetically meet in all remaining Grand Slam finals this year, who would win each of the encounters? And he's asked the same question about Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. If they were to meet in the remaining Slam finals, what would the outcome be? So, yeah, that's
clearly
an
not
interesting...
a Nadal or an Iga fan.
Yeah, just discounting Rafa and Iga from the conversation. I can see it happening, though. I mean, maybe less so with Sabalenka and Rybakina, although they're very much, on form at the moment. We haven't seen consistent, Grand Slam finalists on the women's side for, a whole year on the tour for a long, long time. So I'm not so sure this will actually happen, but it's fun to think about. Chris, what have you put for the Sabalenka-Rybakina question?
Well, I did think this was a good question because it depends so much on the court surface. So I found the toughest one to make a prediction for would probably be the Roland Garros one, because neither player has had that much form there. I know that Rybakina has made a quarterfinal there before, but I don't think that Sabalenka's ever had any joy out there over in Paris. So I did go for Rybakina for Roland Garros and Wimbledon. And then I went for Sabalenka for the US Open because she has made the semi-final there consecutively from since 2021. So that's 2 semi-finals in a row. So I thought that would probably be kind of the one where she would perform the best, and Rybakina has not really shown much form there. So that's what I went for out of those two. What did you go for, Kim?
I went for exactly the same, actually, but I was toying up as also with Roland Garros, and I went for Rybakina for Roland Garros. Just not really any particular. It was just because I thought it would be very, very evenly matched, and I thought Rybakina would maybe just have the edge on the clay. But again, it was very, very fine margins, and like you said, neither of them has particularly got a great track record, at Roland Garros or on the clay per se. So I thought I'll just, seeing as Sabalenka's won the AO, I'll even it out a bit and go for that. So not very scientific, yeah. But for the men, with Alcaraz and Djokovic, I've gone, again, it was Roland Garros that I was debating over, because obviously, Djokovic, we know on his day, remove Rafa from the equation, he'd be sort of a dead cert really for Roland Garros. And, Alcaraz has, not actually gone deep at Roland Garros yet. But I went for Alcaraz just in terms of how well he's been playing, and the fact that he's now won a Grand Slam might prove to have an edge if he meets Djokovic in a slam.
Mm-hmm.
But for Wimbledon, I went for Djokovic because he is still very much the king of Wimbledon, I think. Apologies, Federer fans. And then I went for Alcaraz for the US Open again as defending champion.
I think I did exactly the same. I think I also went for the same there. The question I would say to you, so then who do you think right now is the world number one? Obviously, there's been injuries. They've missed Grand Slams. There's been kind of different points. We've had Djokovic unable to play. Like, he obviously hasn't played the Sunshine Double due to kind of not being vaccinated. But who right now, based on what you've seen this year, is the best tennis player in the world? What would you say?
Oh, well,
seen this year,
based on points, it's Alcaraz. I think I'm going to be a politician and avoid the question. No, it's shaping up for a very interesting clay court season because they will probably both be playing on the tour at the same time, because so far, Alcaraz was out and then Djokovic has been out. I guess Novak Djokovic, he's won the Slam. He had that really super duper start to the year. And, he's not even able to play at the moment. Hence, that was
incredible, yeah.
There. So he's not currently on the tour to gain points or to maintain them. So I suppose Djokovic, obviously, he is one of the big three, arguably is going to be the greatest of all time, statistically and all of that. So I suppose, I'd still give Djokovic the edge. Even if the points say I really
did put you on the spot there, Kim, but I probably would be inclined to agree, but I did not think at this point I'd be asking that question.
No, exactly.
So soon after his comeback.
Yeah, you could ask me tomorrow and I might say something completely different, or this time next week,
when Rafa wins the French, you'll be like, it's Rafa.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. That would be a dream.
Touch wood.
But thank you very much, Stephen, for the question. Got us very much thinking of, potentially hypothetical situations or potentially non-hypothetical situations. But yeah, it's definitely got us thinking. So thank you very much. Keep the questions coming. Other news though, Chris, on the tour. I was looking through Instagram earlier and I saw some announcements. Very exciting. Iga Swiatek has a new sponsor, and it's Roger Federer backed, because Roger Federer has, he's a I think founder or co-entrepreneur of this Swiss shoe brand called On Running. And Iga has signed up to become a global ambassador of the brand. Ben Shelton has also been signed. So quite exciting news. Swiatek being the first female tennis athlete to be a global ambassador of the brand. She's put out an Instagram post to say that she is thrilled to be part of the the brand and to grow, develop and make an impact together. You're very much a brand person, Chris. Do you think this is a good move for both Iga and Federer's sort of company, if you like?
I mean, I think she's a great signing. I think she's the opposite of controversial. You know, I think she's someone who really can be a great ambassador for the brand. I think it's good to see that she is getting these sorts of deals, because I think when you look at kind of the... I think there was a new highest paid sports people and sportswomen, sportsmen list released today. And she's not necessarily the top on the tennis side of things. She is below sort of Raducanu, Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka. Obviously, she is newer to the success. But you do feel like she hasn't necessarily had that big impact sponsorship yet. So I think it is really good to see this, because I think it's one where you do think there needs to be a little bit more of a connection between how you conduct yourself, your results, and then the sponsorships that you get, you know. And I think there hasn't always been. If you look at some sponsorships previously, I will not be naming names, but I do think that it is good news. And I think also, I'm kind of thinking, is this also connected to Federer staying very much connected to the sport? He has talked about developing sort of some of the players that will be signed there, not necessarily in any form of coaching capacity, but it is the idea that a lot of these sports clothing brands like Adidas has a team of coaches as well that were very big, especially I think Sven Gronevel was part of that team as well at one point. So I think it does make me think, how involved is Federer going to be in some of the other sort of development side of things, and as a consultant for some of this stuff, because you'd think he would be playing a bit of a role here, and maybe it's a sign he's going to stay close to the tour.
Yeah, I think it's a great signing, great partnership. They seem to refer to it as on, as they call it on. It's On Running is the full name, but they're calling it on
tennis.
Yeah, but what I'm just thinking, why hasn't he signed On Jabeur? Wouldn't that be very in keeping with the brand name?
Oh, that would be brilliant, Kim. That would be amazing.
But Swiatek got there first. But yeah, good news. And then actually, you mentioned Raducanu and also sponsorship, which brings us nicely onto the announcement of the Billie Jean King Cup qualifier playing squads for the upcoming ties in April. And the news here is that Emma Raducanu is not going to be playing at the GB versus France tie. She's sort of, well, she's indicated that it's due to soreness of the wrist, but actually the following week after this, she's due to, I think, play in Stuttgart, which is sponsored by Porsche, which is one of the companies she endorses. So I think a lot of people are sort of speculating, well, you know, thinking it's a comfortable excuse to not play the Fed Cup or the Billie Jean King Cup and instead go to a tournament where she's got sponsorship obligations. What do you make of that news? And I mean, tell us more about the British team as a whole, because she's not the only player that we might have expected to have seen there, isn't she? Yeah,
it is a bit of a shame, obviously, but the positive news for British fans is that the team that did so well in Glasgow last year are returning in their full capacity. So it's the same players that are playing. So I think that's something really great. So that's Harriet Dart will be leading the team. And it's also players that perform really well. Heather Watson will be there. Katie Boulter is also playing. And then we have the returning doubles pair as well of Alicia Barnett and Olivia Nichols. So that's something that is really nice. They did bond really well, and they did have a great result and great team spirit there. And I think that is really nice. I do think that we have to ask the question here as to whether this is controversial. She has prioritised sort of the Stuttgart Grand Prix before, but because of the Porsche connection, you imagine, and the ranking points that are on the line there, and it isn't ideal necessarily, kind of going from hard courts back to clay. I understand injury prevention, and it can be tricky if you're playing, 3 matches in 2 days, if you're playing doubles, but unlikely that Emma would be picked for the doubles anyway. So it's probably a case to make herself available for this, is what it seems to be reading between the lines. That does mean we're without a top 100 player. And the slightly odd thing is that we are only we only have one of our top 4 ranked singles players in the form of Harriet Darks, Jodie Burrage and Katie Swan are not playing. So I think it is a little bit unfortunate that we don't get to see like a full strength British team. I think we all want to see the best players playing the best players in this, and it would be so good to see Raducanu versus Garcia. And so we should say that Garcia will be playing in the tie that will be in Coventry on the 14th and 15th of April. But I think if I have to say if this is surprising or not, I think she has missed quite a lot of team events. It's not surprising, and I think probably if you're Raducanu with some momentum, prioritising your career when you haven't necessarily had the results you would have wanted to over the last couple of years does make sense. It just might not be a popular decision.
Yeah, and I think a lot has been said about all her sponsorships and all of that. So people are quite quick to think, oh, she's prioritising that over everything else. But like you said, it'll be a loss of tennis. It'd been going back onto a hard court, in the middle of clay season. So she has her reasons, as does Anne Kjothfong for picking, a team that doesn't necessarily include our top ranked singles players. But regardless, I think it's going to be a fantastic event. It's at the CBS Arena in Coventry. I was looking at tickets earlier. There's some really affordable tickets starting from about 10 quid. So if anyone fancies going to see some live tennis, I think it's going to be an absolutely fantastic event. And, world-class player in the form of Caroline Garcia attending as well. I wonder what she'll make of Coventry. I think I went to Coventry a few times last year and I thought it was, loads to see there.
I've been to a TGI's there, Kim.
TGI's. Well, there's a lot more than a TGI's.
2008, I've been to a TGI Fridays, yes.
Lots of heritage. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great. Harry Styles is also at that arena in May. So when you go on to get the tickets, it says Billie Jean King Cup, April, Harry Styles in May. And I'm sure the tickets will be a lot more expensive to see him.
Wow.
So
maybe, Kim, we go to the tennis and we just stick around for Harry Styles in May.
just stay in Coventry for a month till he rocks
Casual
up.
month.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll hopefully we'll be getting in a bit of the Billie Jean King Cup action. But before that, we do have a lot more tennis elsewhere, of course, and we've got Miami kicking off as we speak, really. The draws are out. Some interesting first round matches on the women's side, carrying on the Raducanu chat. She's been drawn against Bianca Andreescu, which is a cracking matchup. I know you're a big fan.
Very much torn about that one.
Bianca. What are you predicting for that tie, Chris?
I thought Bianca played some excellent tennis against Iga, but then having seen Rybakina kind of do what she did against Iga in that semi-final, I've gone for Raducanu. I have. I just think something's clicked in for Raducanu, and I think the courts in Miami will actually favour her a little bit more potentially. So really hoping that she can build on the success of last week.
Yeah, excellent. And I've also saw Sloane Stephens was up against Shelby Rogers in the first round. So another one of your favourites, got kind of a tough opener.
I need some better draws,
American.
don't I, Kim? I need a good night's sleep.
Yeah, we could also have a potentially very awkward and uncomfortable encounter between Marta Kostyk and Anastasia Potapova if that matchup happens. Could be a lot of tension in that one, and I just hope that Potapova doesn't come onto court wearing anything that she shouldn't be. Because that could be not a pleasant situation. Some interesting matchups. Pegula against Collins could be quite early on. Kvitova, Donna Vekic. Donna Vekic was in quite good form, having won a title recently. Lots of, obviously, it's a stacked draw as usual. On the men's side, some interesting sort of early rounds. Dominic Thiem against Lorenzo Sonego. Thiem on, here with a wild card, continuing to not really make too many inroads on the tour since he came back. I don't know if he can do anything this time round, but Thiem Sonego, I think that one is one that kind of caught my eye in the draw. And I know you've earmarked Gael Monfils against Ugo Humbert, and I wondered if that was because is it a battle for the French number one, Chris? That's
actually an interesting question, because the provisional ranking that Gael is there on might mean that he might be on the entry list as the highest French entrant because of the provisional ranking, but it is actually Gasquet. Gasquet's set at number one at ranked 14 in the live rankings at 39. But Humbert did get that win last week against a rather frustrated Denis Shapovalov. Shapovalov. So I do think that we'll be seeing him go up the rankings again very quickly.
Well, it's good to know Gasquet's still French number one. I haven't had my weekly fix of French number one antics.
Our regular segment.
Let's make some tentative predictions, though, shall we? As we're at the start of Miami. We've got quarters and semis, finals and champions. Joel has sent in his predictions, so we can very much sort of have a go at them if we think they're no good, or we can commend him. But let's look at the predictions for the men's side. We'll kind of go through the draw, shall we? And we'll just say our matchups. So, Chris, who have you got for the first quarter?
For the men, I have Alcaraz versus Holger Rune.
Oh, you're always going for Rune, aren't you? You're not put off from your recent...
He's my the Fritz of Joel. I think that's we always seem to stand those two.
Yeah, Joel's gone for Alcaraz and Fritz. I've gone for Alcaraz and Fritz as well. So we'll see.
You two do make similar predictions, I have to say.
The next one, though, our second quarter, I think we've all gone the same. I've got Zverev against Sinner.
Yes, I've done the same.
Yeah, so has Joel. So we're in agreement on that one. Our third quarter, I've got Hurkacz and Medvedev. What about yourself?
I believe that Joel and I have both gone for Norrie and Medvedev for that one. So a slight difference on that one.
Yeah, I went for Hurkacz because he's a former Miami champion. So I thought maybe
he's playing pretty well at the moment. I can see that.
Yeah, I thought maybe he likes the courts here. Our fourth quarter, Joel, I'll go for Joel's first. He's got TFO against Tsitsipas. I've gone for TFO against Khachanov. And Chris,
also TFO Tsitsipas on this side, yes.
Yeah, I sort of just wasn't convinced by Tsitsipas. I'm sure he'll prove me wrong and do super well. So
don't say it won't happen.
I've got a semi-final lineup in my predictions of Alcaraz against Sinner, which is a repeat of Indian Wells, and I've got Medvedev against Khachanov in my other semi-final.
I have Alcaraz Sinner also, and I've got an exact replica with Medvedev and TFO.
Nice. I think Joel's gone for Alcaraz, Zverev, Medvedev and TFO. So he's thinking Zverev's going to get the better of Sinner. We are very much of a muchness. Joel's got a final of Zverev against Medvedev. So he thinks
that's where he differs.
Is Zverev going to beat Alcaraz? Joel seems to think so.
In what world, Joel? It's the woo-woos. The woo-woos have got to his head.
Yeah, when did he make these predictions?
Yes,
yeah, after about 5
we'll have
woo-woos.
to ask him.
He's got Medvedev winning as a result of that final. What have you got in your final then, Chris?
Well, I've gone for the Sunshine Double. So I've got for Alcaraz taking out Medvedev. So I think he will do it, not just the double in consecutive years, getting one each year. I think he's going to do the actual Sunshine Double.
The actual double. Yeah, I've gone the same. I've gone Alcaraz Medvedev final, Alcaraz with a repeat victory.
I feel good about this, Kim. You've been pretty good on the predictions so far. Yeah.
I think I'm quite confident with that. She says now. Well, let's look at the women. Maybe I'm less confident with the women, maybe. Let's look at what we've got in our quarter lineups. Quarterfinal 1. This is where potentially, I think this is they're all interesting quarters, but we could very well be on for a Swiatek Rybakina rematch in the quarterfinal. And that's my quarterfinal lineup. I know Joel's got that as well. Have you gone for the same?
I also have gone for the same. I wasn't necessarily sure I was going to go for it, but then I thought, you know what, I'd love to see it again and see if Iga can just come out with some very different energy, you know?
Yeah, I would love to see it. And if Rybakina manages to beat her for a third time on the trot as well, that would also be interesting. Or will Iga get, finally manage to reverse the trend? Second quarterfinal, who have you got in that one, Chris?
I went for JPEG and Coco Gauff, and actually I think Joel went for the same of Pegula and Gauff.
JPEG. I went for JPEG as well, but I've gone for Ludmila Samsonova.
You love a Samsonova moment. You really do. Your Wimbledon pick, no?
Oh, yeah, I did predict her to win Wimbledon 1 year.
Well,
but she did do well on the grass.
She can enter. Yeah.
Yeah, she would have won it last year if she could have played it.
Exactly.
My third quarterfinal, I've gone for Maria Sakkari and Petra Kvitova. Joel, I see, has gone for Belinda Bencic and Petra Kvitova. And Chris, are you
I've gone for Emma Raducanu.
Emma Raducanu
and Donna Vekic.
Oh wow! Now that is quite rogue, but
It's bold. It is bold. I'll give you that.
Given Raducanu's good form in Indian
I loved
Wells.
watching her last week, so I really hope that she does something here.
No, absolutely. Fourth quarterfinal, I've gone for Karolina Muchova. I know we mentioned her earlier, how we were hoping she would continue her good form from Indian Wells. I've gone for Muchova against Sabalenka in the fourth quarterfinal. And Joel has gone for Kudermetova against Sabalenka.
He is partial to Kudermetova, that's for sure.
Kudermetova, yeah. What about yourself?
He does.
Chris?
I've gone for Muchova, and I thought Krejcikova is actually going to get the revenge on her loss from this week, and I think she's going to take out Sabalenka.
Oh, well, you're partial to a bit of a Krejcikova prediction, I think.
I do like a Krejcikova moment, that's true. We just say the same things every time doing these predictions. I'm starting to think with our favourites.
Are we biased? Yeah, we just like always picking our favourite players.
But we're
I
not
haven't
always
picked
wrong.
Garcia. No, I'm not picking my favourites
exactly.
necessarily. So semi-final lineup, Joel has gone for Rybakina against Pegula and then Kvitova against Sabalenka. From that, he's gone for a Rybakina-Sabalenka final again, with Rybakina winning again. So he's very much repeating Indian Wells a little bit. Who have you gone for, Chris, for your semis onwards?
I guess Joel did go a little bit rogue in the final with Zverev, but I've gone for Rybakina Pegula, Raducanu Krejcikova, and then I've gone for Rybakina Krejcikova in the final with a Rybakina win.
Oh, so you got Raducanu getting to the semis as well. Amazing.
Oh, last time I had Sloane get into the semis. You've always got to go rogue once, Kim. That's my theory with predictions.
Got to go bold, yeah. Go bold or go home.
You've got your Samsonova.
Yeah, to be fair, I've got Samsonova in my semis. Yes, she is.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. Watch this space. Rybakina against Samsonova and then Kvitova Sabalenka. I've also got a Rybakina Sabalenka final, but I've gone for Sabalenka to win. Put brackets revenge on my predictions. So
she's fired up.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see how they all pan out. And listeners, I'm sure you can laugh at us very much when halfway through the week we do a catch up and we lament those predictions. They'll be put up on our social channels, I believe. And we will be back next week to do a sort of mid Miami catch up. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tennis Weekly Pod. And you can email the show at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. Or check out our website at tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we'll be back next week at Tennis Weekly HQ for another episode. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.